East Timor. In 1975, Indonesian military forces, the TNI, invaded the Portuguese colony of East Timor, then under the administration of the pro-independence Fretilin Party, the Revolutionary Front for the Independent East Timor, which had just unilaterally declared independence. From the outset, the invasion was strongly resisted by the heavily outgunned and outnumbered Fretilin armed forces. The invaders treated the local population harshly, indiscriminately killing hundreds of mostly civilian Dili residents in the first 2 weeks of the occupation. The Indonesian occupation lasted 24 years, until the intervention of the UN-authorized Interfaith Force in September 1999. The UN intervention followed a plebiscite in which 78.5% of the population rejected integration with Indonesia. In the first decade of the occupation, the treatment of the population at large by the occupying forces displayed genocidal characteristics. The worst period was between December 1975 and 1980, when intense military operations were carried out across the island. Then East Timor was closed to the outside world, and even the International Red Cross was denied access until some 4 years after the invasion. According to East Timorese sources, including the Catholic Church, which traditionally maintained population statistics and monitored the humanitarian situation, as many as 200,000 East Timorese died. Tens of thousands were killed by troops, while many others died from disease and starvation, conditions resulting directly or indirectly from occupation policies. A study of the population decline supports these charges. East Timor's population was estimated at 688,000 in the months before the invasion, and was growing at about 2% per year. According to Indonesia's census assessment in 1980, the population had fallen to 550,000. Following visits to the territory by the International Red Cross and foreign diplomats in 1979, the human rights situation began to improve, but major atrocities continued. One of the worst of these was the massacre at Coras in 1983, where more than 1,000 East Timorese, including women and children, were massacred in reprisal for the killing of several Indonesian soldiers and an engagement with resistance forces of the FAL-INTIL, the Armed Forces of National Liberation of East Timor. Summary executions and disappearances continued to feature in the annual reports of Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. In 1991, the massacre of more than 200 East Timorese by TNI troops at a peaceful demonstration in Santa Cruz Cemetery attracted world condemnation. This atrocity had a systematic character, reflecting a determination on the part of the Indonesian authorities to eliminate opponents of integration. However, in the case of the Santa Cruz massacre, the Suharto government bowed to international pressure, and a number of soldiers were tried by a military court. The few who were found guilty were given only short sentences, ranging from 6 to 18 months. This punishment was in stark contrast to the long terms of imprisonment handed out to surviving demonstrators in a separate trial, where they were sentenced to periods of imprisonment ranging from 6 to more than 20 years. Since Indonesia's withdrawal in 1999, UN agencies and other humanitarian organizations have had free access to East Timor, and revelations of past events reveals beyond doubt that the humanitarian costs of this act of forced integration reached genocidal proportions. The East Timor case is manifestly one of the most serious of its kind in modern history. Indonesia's education policy banned the teaching of Tetum, East Timor's lingua franca, and Portuguese. This was a clear effort to eradicate a portion of East Timorian culture. Indonesia's policy of sending thousands of Indonesian settlers into the province also seemed designed to achieve the destruction of the distinctive culture of East Timor. The international response to Indonesia's serious violation of international law was at first characterized by indifference and irresolution. As a result, the Suharto government, despite its heavy dependence on Western economic aid, did not feel the need to respond to international concerns in a positive way. The expressions of international concern at the deteriorating humanitarian situation in the years following the invasion were so weak that Indonesian authorities became openly defiant of world opinion. In the 1980s, however, East Timor's Bishop Carlos Bello, began to expose the situation to the international media and visiting foreign dignitaries. The Santa Cruz massacre in November 1991 forced the Indonesian authorities onto the defensive. The Suharto government's concessions were nevertheless of little real significance, falling well short of popular demands by East Timor's leaders for the removal of the Indonesian military, and for the right of self-determination. Indonesia agreed to hold the plebiscite under UN auspices, in August 1999. This concession was attributable less to international pressures than to the fall of Suharto following the Asian economic collapse. The flexible stance adopted by President Habibie and the determined efforts of Kofi Annan, the newly appointed UN Secretary-General, were the key elements in the fortuitous sequence of events that led to East Timor's liberation in September 1999, after 24 years of occupation. As it happened, the Indonesian military maintained its suppression until the very end. TNI generals formed a militia force with the aim of preventing the loss of the province. When the results of the plebiscite were announced, a large-scale TNI operation swung into action. Pro-independence supporters, now representing the majority opinion, were the subject of violence and intimidation. In the space of a few weeks, more than 1,500 were killed. An estimated 250,000 were deported to West Timor, and 73% of all buildings and houses were destroyed. This spate of killing and destruction was interrupted by the Interfaith intervention, and by President Habibie's decision to withdraw from East Timor in the face of strong international protests. The pattern of the atrocities carried out by Indonesian troops reveals a systemic character. Until Santa Cruz, no TNI troops or commanders were ever placed on trial for these crimes against humanity. In the case of the events of 1999, the tribunal set up by the Indonesian government was apparently designed to prevent disclosure of TNI command responsibility. The few TNI commanders placed on trial were charged not with their role in organizing the violence, but with having failed to stop it. Even so, most were acquitted, while the few who were found guilty won their appeals to a higher court. East Timor, listening, is Timor/or Timor-Leste/Timor/Tedum, Timor-Leste, officially the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste 6, Portuguese, República Democrática de Timor-Leste, 7, Tedum, República Democrática Timor-Leste, 8, is a sovereign state in maritime Southeast Asia. 9, it comprises the eastern half of the island of Timor, the nearby islands of Vantaro and Yako, and Dikas, an exclave on the northwestern side of the island surrounded by Indonesian West Timor. The country's size is about 15,410 square kilometers, 5,400 square miles. 10. East Timor was colonized by Portugal in the 16th century, and was known as Portuguese Timor until November 1975, when the Revolutionary Front for an Independent East Timor, Fretilin, declared the territory's independence. 9 days later, it was invaded and occupied by Indonesia and was declared Indonesia's 27th province the following year. The Indonesian occupation of East Timor was characterized by a highly violent decades-long conflict between separatist groups, especially Fretilin, and the Indonesian military. In 1999, following the United Nations-sponsored Act of Self-Determination, Indonesia relinquished control of the territory. East Timor became the first new sovereign state of the 21st century on May 20, 2002 and joined the United Nations and the Community of Portuguese-language countries. In 2011, East Timor announced its intention to gain membership status in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, by applying to become its 11th member. 11. It is one of only two predominantly Christian nations in Southeast Asia, the other being the Philippines. Contents: Hide. 1. Etymology. 2. History. 3. Government. 4. Administrative divisions. 5. Foreign relations and military. 6. Geography. 7. Economy. 8. Demographics. 8.1 Languages. 8.2 Education. 8.3 Health. 8.4 Religion. 9. Culture. 9.1 Arts. 9.2 Cuisine. 9.3 Sports. 10 See also. 11 References. 12 Bibliography. 13 External links. Etymology Edit. Timor derives from Timor, the word for east in Malay, which became recorded as Timor in Portuguese, thus resulting in the tautological toponym meaning eastest, in Portuguese Timor-Leste, leste being the word for east, in Tetum Timor-Leste, Leste being the word for east, lit rising sun. In Indonesian, the country is called Timor Timor, thus using the Portuguese name for the island followed by the word for east. The official names under the constitution are Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste 12, in English, República Democrática de Timor-Leste 7, in Portuguese and República Democrática Timor-Leste 8, in Tetum. The International Organization for Standardization, ISO, official short form in English and all other languages is Timor-Leste, codes, TLS and TL, which has been adopted by the United Nations, 13, the European Union, 14, and the National Standards Organizations of France, AFNOR, the United States, ANSI, 15, United Kingdom, BSI, Germany, DIN, and Sweden, SIS, all diplomatic missions to the country by protocol and the CIA World Factbook. 16. History Edit. Main article, History of East Timor. Humans first settled in East Timor 42,000 years ago. 17. Descendants of at least 3 waves of migration are believed still to live in East Timor. The first is described by anthropologists as people of the Vedo-Australoid type around 3000 BC. A second migration brought Melanesians. The earlier Vedo-Australoid peoples withdrew at this time to the mountainous interior. Finally, Proto-Malays arrived from South China and North Indochina. 18. Hakka traders are among those descended from this final group. 19. Timor's origin myths tell of ancestors that sailed around the eastern end of Timor arriving on land in the south. Some stories recount Timorese ancestors journeying from the Malay Peninsula or the Minangkabau Highlands of Sumatra. 20. Austronesians migrated to Timor, and are thought to be associated with the development of agriculture on the island. Citation needed. Thirdly, Proto-Malays arrived from South China and North Indochina. 21. Before European colonialism, Timor was included in Chinese and Indian trading networks, and in the 14th century was an exporter of aromatic sandalwood, slaves, honey, and wax. It was the relative abundance of sandalwood in Timor that attracted European explorers to the island in the early 16th century. 22. During that time, European explorers reported that the island had a number of small chiefdoms or princedoms. Citation needed. Arms of Portuguese Timor, 1935 to 1975. 23. The Portuguese established outposts in Timor and Malacca. Effective European occupation of a small part of the territory began in 1769, when the city of Dili was founded and the colony of Portuguese Timor declared. 24. A definitive border between the Dutch colonized western half of the island and the Portuguese colonized eastern half of the island was established by the Permanent Court of Arbitration of 1914. 25. And it remains the international boundary between the successor states East Timor and Indonesia. For the Portuguese, East Timor remained little more than a neglected trading post until the late 19th century, with minimal investment in infrastructure, health, and education. Sandalwood remained the main export crop, with coffee exports becoming significant in the mid-19th century. As was often the case, Portuguese rule was generally neglectful but exploitative where it existed. 26. At the beginning of the 20th century, a faltering home economy prompted the Portuguese to extract greater wealth from its colonies, which was met with East Timorese resistance. 26. During World War II, the Japanese occupied Dili, and the mountainous interior became the scene of a guerrilla campaign, known as the Battle of Timor. Waged by Allied forces and East Timorese volunteers against the Japanese, the struggle resulted in the deaths of between 40,000 and 70,000 East Timorese. 27. the Japanese eventually drove the last of the Australian and Allied forces out. However, following the end of World War II and Japanese surrender, Portuguese control was reinstated. Following the 1974 Portuguese Revolution, Portugal effectively abandoned its colony on Timor and civil war between East Timorese political parties broke out in 1975. Timorese women with the Indonesian national flag, Timor, Indonesia. The Revolutionary Front for an Independent East Timor, Frente Revolucionaria de Timor-Leste Independente, Fretilin, resisted a Timorese Democratic Union, União Democrática Timorense, UDT, coup attempt, 28, and unilaterally declared independence on November 28, 1975. Fearing a communist state within the Indonesian archipelago, the Indonesian military, with Australian, British, and U.S. support, launched an invasion of East Timor in December 1975. 29. Indonesia declared East Timor its 27th province on July 17, 1976, Timor. 30. The UN Security Council opposed the invasion and the territory's nominal status in the UN remained as non-self-governing territory under Portuguese administration. 31. A demonstration for independence from Indonesia held in Australia during September 1999. Indonesia's occupation of East Timor was marked by violence and brutality. A detailed statistical report prepared for the Commission for Reception, Truth and Reconciliation in East Timor cited a minimum bound of 102,800 conflict-related deaths in the period 1974 to 1999, namely, approximately 18,600 killings and 84,200 excess deaths from hunger and illness. 32. The East Timorese guerrilla force, Forças Armadas da Libertação Nacional de Timor-Leste, FAL-INTIL, fought a campaign against the Indonesian forces from 1975 to 1999. Citation needed. José Ramos Horta, 1996 Nobel Peace Prize winner, second president of East Timor. The 1991 Dili massacre was a turning point for the independence cause internationally, and an East Timor solidarity movement grew in Portugal, Australia, and other Western countries. Following the resignation of Indonesian President Suharto, a UN-sponsored agreement between Indonesia and Portugal allowed for a UN-supervised popular referendum in August 1999. A clear vote for independence was met with a punitive campaign of violence by East Timor's pro-integration militia with the support of elements of the Indonesian military. With Indonesian permission, an Australian-led international peacekeeping force was deployed until order was restored. In late 1999, the administration of East Timor was taken over by the UN through the United Nations Transitional Administration in East Timor, UNDP. 33. The Interfleet deployment ended in February 2000 with a transfer of military command to the UN. 34. On August 30, 2001, the East Timorese voted in their first election organized by the UN to elect members of the Constituent Assembly. 1235, on March 22, 2002, the Constituent Assembly approved the Constitution. 12. By May 2002, over 205,000 refugees had returned. 36. On May 20, 2002, the Constitution of the Democratic Republic of East Timor came into force and East Timor was recognized as independent by the UN. 35-37, the Constituent Assembly was renamed the National Parliament and Zanana Gusmao was sworn in as the country's first president. On September 27, 2002, East Timor was renamed to Timor-Leste, using the Portuguese language, and was admitted as a member state by the UN. 38. The following year, Gusmao declined another presidential term, and in the build-up to the April 2007 presidential elections there were renewed outbreaks of violence. José Ramos Horta was elected president in the May 2007 election. 39, while Gusmao ran in the parliamentary elections and became prime minister. Ramos Horta was critically injured in an attempted assassination in February 2008. Prime Minister Gusmao also faced gunfire separately but escaped unharmed. Australian reinforcements were immediately sent to help keep order. 40. In 2006, the United Nations sent in security forces to restore order when unrest and factional fighting forced 15% of the population, 155,000 people, to flee their homes. In March 2011, the UN handed off operational control of the police force to the East Timor authorities. The United Nations ended its peacekeeping mission on December 31, 2012. 41. Government edit. Main article, Politics of East Timor. Nicolau Lobato Presidential Palace in Dili. The head of state of East Timor is the President of the Republic, who is elected by popular vote for a 5-year term. Although their executive powers are somewhat limited, the President does have the power to veto government legislation. Following elections, the President usually, but not necessarily, appoints the leader of the majority party or majority coalition as the Prime Minister of East Timor and the cabinet on the proposal of the latter. As head of government, the Prime Minister presides over the cabinet. 1. The unicameral East Timorese parliament is the national parliament or Parlamento Nacional, whose members are elected by popular vote to a 5-year term. The number of seats can vary from a minimum of 52 to a maximum of 65. The East Timorese constitution was modeled on that of Portugal. The country is still in the process of building its administration and governmental institutions. Government departments include the Polícia Nacional de Timor-Leste, Police, East Timor Ministry for State and Internal Administration, Civil Aviation Division of Timor-Leste, and Immigration Department of Timor-Leste. Citation needed. Administrative Divisions edit. Main articles, Municipalities of East Timor, Administrative Posts of East Timor, and SACOs of East Timor. The 13 municipalities of East Timor. East Timor is divided into 13 municipalities, which in turn are subdivided into 65 administrative posts, 442 SACOs, villages, and 2,225 aldeas, hamlets. 4243. Ekas. Likiza. Dili. Manichuto. Baka. Laudam. Bobanoro. Irmra. Elo. Bikik. Kovalima. Ainoro. Manufai. Foreign Relations and Military Edit. Main articles, Foreign Relations of East Timor and Timor-Leste Defense Force. East Timor sought membership in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, in 2007, and a formal application was submitted in March 2011. 44. Indonesia supports East Timor's bid to join ASEAN. FFDTL soldiers standing in formation. The Timor-Leste Defense Force, versus the Defense de Timor-Leste, FFDTL, is the military body responsible for the defense of East Timor. The FFDTL was established in February 2001 and comprised 2 small infantry battalions, a small naval component, and several supporting units. The FFDTL's primary role is to protect East Timor from external threats. It also has an internal security role, which overlaps with that of the National Police of East Timor, Polícia Nacional de Timor-Leste, PNTL. This overlap has led to tensions between the services, which have been exacerbated by poor morale and lack of discipline within the FFDTL. The FFDTL's problems came to a head in 2006 when almost half the force was dismissed following protests over discrimination and poor conditions. That dismissal contributed to a general collapse of both the FFDTL and PNTL and may force the government to request foreign peacekeepers to restore security. The FFDTL is being rebuilt with foreign assistance and has drawn up a long-term force development plan. Geography edit. Main article, Geography of East Timor. Calm Beach, East Timor. Located in Southeast Asia, 45. The island of Timor is part of maritime Southeast Asia, and is the largest and easternmost of the Lesser Sunda Islands. To the north of the island are the Ambai Strait, Witter Strait, and the Greater Banda Sea. The Timor Sea separates the island from Australia to the south, and the Indonesian province of East Nusa Tenggara lies to East Timor's west. Much of the country is mountainous, and its highest point is the Tamalaw, also known as Mount Bramalaw, at 2,963 meters, 9,721 feet. 46. The climate is tropical and generally hot and humid. It is characterized by distinct rainy and dry seasons. The capital, largest city, and main port is Dili, and the second largest city is the eastern town of Baucaw. East Timor lies between latitudes 8 degrees and 10 degrees S, and longitudes 124 degrees and 128 degrees E. Mountains in Halo. The easternmost area of East Timor consists of the Pacho Range in the Lake Iralolaro area, which contains the county's first conservation area, the Ninoconas Santana National Park. 47. It contains the last remaining tropical dry forested area within the country. It hosts a number of unique plant and animal species and is sparsely populated. 48. The northern coast is characterized by a number of coral reef systems that have been determined to be at risk. 49. Economy edit. Main article, Economy of East Timor. East Timor Exportory Map, 2010. A branch of the Portuguese bank Caja de Depósitos, in Dili. Commerce and Baucaw. Fractional coins centavos. East Timor has a market economy that used to depend upon exports of a few commodities such as coffee, marble, oil, and sandalwood. 50. East Timor's economy grew by about 10% in 2011 and at a similar rate in 2012. 51. Timor now has revenue from offshore oil and gas reserves, but little of it has gone to develop villages, which still rely on subsistence farming. 52. Nearly half the population lives in extreme poverty. 52. The Timor-Leste Petroleum Fund was established in 2005, and by 2011 it had reached a worth of $8.7 billion. 53. East Timor is labeled by the International Monetary Fund as the most oil-dependent economy in the world. 54. The Petroleum Fund pays for nearly all of the government's annual budget, which has increased from $70 million in 2004 to $1.3 billion in 2011, with a $1.8 billion proposal for 2012. 53. East Timor's income from oil and gas stands to significantly increase after their announcement to cancel a controversial agreement with Australia, which has given Australia half of the income from oil and gas since 2006. 55. The economy is dependent on government spending and, to a lesser extent, assistance from international donors. 56. Private sector development has lagged due to human capital shortages, infrastructure weakness, an incomplete legal system, and an inefficient regulatory environment. 56. After petroleum, the second largest export is coffee, which generates about $10 million a year. 56. Starbucks is a major purchaser of East Timor's coffee. 57. Dili's harbor. 9,000 tons of coffee, 108 tons of cinnamon and 161 tons of cocoa were harvested in 2012, making the country the 40th-ranked producer of coffee, the 6th-ranked producer of cinnamon and the 50th-ranked producer of cocoa worldwide. 58. According to data gathered in the 2010 census, 87.7% of urban, 321,043 people, and 18.9% of rural, 821,459 people, households have electricity, for an overall average of 38.2%. 59. The agriculture sector employs 80% of the active population. 60. In 2009, about 67,000 households grew coffee in East Timor, with a large proportion being poor. 60. Currently, the gross margins are about $120 per hectare, with returns per Labor Day of about $3.70. 60. There are 11,000 household growing mung beans as of 2009, most of them subsistence farmers. 60. The country was ranked 169th overall and last in the East Asia and Pacific region by the Doing Business 2013 report by the World Bank. The country fared particularly poorly in the registering property, enforcing contracts and resolving insolvency categories, ranking last worldwide in all three. 61. In regards to telecommunications infrastructure, East Timor is the second-to-last ranked Asian country in the World Economic Forum's Network Readiness Index, NRI, with only Myanmar falling behind it in Southeast Asia. NRI is an indicator for determining the development level of a country's information and communication technologies. East Timor ranked number 141 overall in the 2014 NRI ranking, down from 134 in 2013. 62. The Portuguese colonial administration granted concessions to Oceanic Exploration Corporation to develop petroleum and natural gas deposits in the waters southeast of Timor. However, this was curtailed by the Indonesian invasion in 1976. Citation needed. The resources were divided between Indonesia and Australia with the Timor Gap Treaty in 1989. 63. East Timor inherited no permanent maritime boundaries when it attained independence. Citation needed. A provisional agreement, the Timor Sea Treaty, signed when East Timor became independent on May 20, 2002, defined a Joint Petroleum Development Area, JPDA, and awarded 90% of revenues from existing projects in that area to East Timor and 10% to Australia. 64. An agreement in 2005 between the governments of East Timor and Australia mandated that both countries put aside their dispute over maritime boundaries and that East Timor would receive 50% of the revenues from the resource exploitation in the area, estimated at 26 billion Australian dollars, or about $20 billion over the lifetime of the project. 65. From the Greater Sunrise Development. 66. In 2013, East Timor launched a case at the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague to pull out of a gas treaty that it had signed with Australia, accusing the Australian Secret Intelligence Service, ASIS, of bugging the East Timorese cabinet room in Dili in 2004. 67. There are no patent laws in East Timor. 68. A Timor railway system has been in proposal but the current government has yet to advocate the proposal due to lack of funds and expertise. Citation needed. Demographics Senate. An East Timorese in traditional dress. Historical populations. Year pop. Plus minus percent. 1985 155,350. 1997 147,557 plus 34.6%. 2001 787,340 plus 5.3%. 2004 923,198 plus 17.3%. 2010 1,066,582 plus 15.5%. 2015 1,167,242 plus 9.4%. Source, 2015 Census 69. Main article, Demographics of East Timor. East Timor recorded a population of 1,167,242 in its 2015 census. 3. The word Mobir, 70. Formerly used by the Portuguese to refer to native East Timorese and often employed as synonymous with the illiterate and uneducated, was adopted by Fretilin as a term of pride. 71. Native East Timorese consist of a number of distinct ethnic groups, most of whom are of mixed Malayo-Polynesian and Melanesian, Papuan descent. Citation needed. The largest Malayo-Polynesian ethnic groups are the Tetum 72, 100,000. Primarily in the north coast and around Dili, the Mambai, 80,000, in the central mountains, the Tukudid, 63,170, in the area around Mabara and Lekiza, the Galilei, 50,000, between the tribes of Mambi and Makasi, the Kemak, 50,000, in north-central Timor Island, and the Bkano, 20,000, in the area around Pant Makassar. Citation needed. The main tribes of predominantly Papuan origin include the Bunok, 50,000, in the central interior of Timor Island, The Fretilin, 30,000, at the eastern tip of the island near Los Palos, and Democracy, toward the eastern end of the island. Citation needed. As a result of interracial marriage which was common during the Portuguese era, there is a population of people of mixed East Timorese and Portuguese origin, known in Portuguese as mestiços. There is a small Chinese minority, most of whom are Hakka. 73. Many Chinese left in the mid-1970s. 74. Languages edit. Main article, Languages of East Timor. Major language groups in East Timor by Sacco. East Timor's two official languages are Portuguese and Tetum. English and Indonesian are sometimes used, and are designated as working languages. 75. Tetum belongs to the Austronesian family of languages spoken throughout Southeast Asia. 76. The 2010 census found that the most commonly spoken mother tongues were Tetum Prasa, mother tongue for 36.6% of the population, Mambai, 12.5%, Bakasai, 9.7%, Tetum Tarik, 6.0%, Bkanu, 5.9%, Kamak, 5.9%, Bunak, 5.3%, Tokodid, 3.7%, and Fretilin, 3.6%. Other indigenous languages largely accounted for the remaining 10.9%, while Portuguese was spoken natively by just under 600 people. 77. Under Indonesian rule, the use of Portuguese was banned and only Indonesian was allowed to be used in government offices, schools and public business. 78. During the Indonesian occupation, Tetum and Portuguese were important unifying elements for the East Timorese people in opposing Javanese culture. 79. Portuguese was adopted as one of the two official languages upon independence in 2002 for this reason and as a link to Lusophone nations in other parts of the world. It is now being taught and promoted with the help of Brazil, Portugal, and the community of Portuguese language countries. 80. The government believes that Portuguese will be the dominant and most widely used language in East Timor in the next few years, as proficiency in the Portuguese language is accelerating rapidly. Citation needed. Indonesian and English are defined as working languages under the Constitution in the final and transitional provisions, without setting a final date. Aside from Tetum, Ethnologue lists the following indigenous languages: Adob, Bkanu, Bunak, Fretilin, Galilei, Haban, Idate, Kerui Mediki, Kamak, Lakolai, Bakasi, Mikava, Mambi, Not, Tukudid, and Waima. 81. It is estimated that English is understood by 31.4% of the population. As of 2012, 35% speak, read, and write Portuguese, which is up significantly from less than 5% in the 2006 UN Development Report. 75. East Timor is a member of the Community of Portuguese Language Countries, also known as the Lusophone Commonwealth, and of the Latin Union. 83. According to the Atlas of the World's Languages in Danger, there are 6 endangered languages in East Timor: Adob, Habu, Kerui Mediki, Mika, Note, and Waima. 84. Education edit. Escola Portuguesa Rio Sinati, the Portuguese School of Dili. East Timor's adult literacy rate in 2010 was 58.3%, up from just 37.6% in 2001. 85. Illiteracy was at 95% at the end of Portuguese rule. 86. The National University of East Timor is the country's main university. There are also 4 colleges. 87. Since independence, both Indonesian and Tetum have lost ground as mediums of instruction, while Portuguese has increased. In 2001 only 8.4% of primary school and 6.8% of secondary school students attended a Portuguese medium school. By 2005 this had increased to 81.6% for primary and 46.3% for secondary schools. 88. Indonesian formerly played a considerable role in education, being used by 73.7% of all secondary school students as a medium of instruction, but by 2005 it was used by most schools only in Bokok, Manchukuo, as well as the capital district. 88. Health edit. Life expectancy at birth was at 60.7 in 2007. 89. The fertility rate is at 6 births per woman. 89. Healthy life expectancy at birth was at 55 years in 2007. 89. Government expenditure on health was at $150 PPP per person in 2006. 89. There were 2 hospitals and 14 village healthcare facilities in 1974. By 1994, there were 11 hospitals and 330 healthcare centers. 87. The 2010 maternal mortality rate per 100,000 births for East Timor is 370. This is compared with 928.6 in 2008 and 1016.3 in 1990. The under 5 mortality rate per 1,000 births is 60 and the neonatal mortality rate per 1,000 live births is 27. 90. The number of midwives per 1,000 live births is 8 and the lifetime risk of death for pregnant women is 1 in 44. 91. The country has one of the highest smoking rates in the world, with 33% of the population, including 61% of men, smoking daily. 92. By 2015, due to a Cuban East Timorese training program initiated in 2003, East Timor will have more doctors per capita than any other country in Southeast Asia. 93. Religion edit. Main article, Religion in East Timor. The Church of São Antonio de Motel, Dili. According to the 2010 census, 96.9% of the population is Roman Catholic, 2.2% Protestant, 0.3% Muslim, and 0.5% practice some other or no religion. 94. The number of churches has grown from 100 in 1974 to over 800 in 1994, 87, with church membership having grown considerably under Indonesian rule as Pancasila, Indonesia's state ideology, requires all citizens to believe in one God and does not recognize traditional beliefs. East Timor's animist belief systems did not fit with Indonesia's constitutional monotheism, resulting in mass conversions to Christianity. Portuguese clergy were replaced with Indonesian priests in Latin and Portuguese Mass was replaced by Indonesian Mass. 95. While just 20% of East Timorese called themselves Catholics at the time of the 1975 invasion, the figure surged to reach 95% by the end of the first decade after the invasion. 96. In rural areas, Roman Catholicism is practiced along with local traditions. 97. With over 90% Catholic population, East Timor is currently one of the most densely Catholic countries in the world. 98. While the Constitution of East Timor enshrines the principles of freedom of religion and separation of church and state in Section 45(1), it also acknowledges the participation of the Catholic Church in the process of national liberation in its preamble. However, it has no legal value. 99. Upon independence, the country joined the Philippines to become the only 2 predominantly Roman Catholic states in Asia, although nearby parts of eastern Indonesia such as West Timor and Flores also have Roman Catholic majorities. The Roman Catholic Church divides East Timor into 3 dioceses, the Diocese of Dili, the Diocese of Bokok, and the Diocese of Miliana. 100. Culture edit. Main article, Culture of East Timor. Sacred House, Litanu, in Los Palos. The culture of East Timor reflects numerous influences, including Portuguese, Roman Catholic, and Indonesian, on Timor's indigenous Austronesian and Melanesian cultures. East Timorese culture is heavily influenced by Austronesian legends. For example, East Timorese creation myth has it that an aging crocodile transformed into the island of Timor as part of a debt repayment to a young boy who had helped the crocodile when it was sick. 101. As a result, the island is shaped like a crocodile and the boy's descendants are the native East Timorese who inhabit it. The face leaving the crocodile refers to the pain exile of East Timorese from their island. outset. There is also a strong tradition clarification needed, of poetry in the country. Citation needed. Prime Minister Zanana Gusmao, for example, is a distinguished poet, earning the moniker Poet Warrior. 102. Architecturally, Portuguese-style buildings can be found, along with the traditional totem houses of the eastern region. These are known as Umalulik, sacred houses, Independent Tenue, legate houses, infadalaku. Citation needed. Craftsmanship and the weaving of traditional scarves, tais, is also widespread. Citation needed. An extensive collection of Timorese audiovisual material is held at the National Film and Sound Archive of Australia. These holdings have been identified in a document titled the NFSA Timor-Leste Collection Profile, which features catalogue entries and essays for a total of 795 NFSA-held moving image, recorded sound and documentation works that have captured the history and culture of East Timor since the early 20th century. 103. The NFSA is working with the East Timor government to ensure that all of this material can be used and accessed by the people of that country. 104. In 2013 the first East Timorese feature film, Beatrice's War, was released. 105. In 2009 and 2010, East Timor was the nation of subject matter for the Australian and South Korean films Balibo and A Barefoot Dream. Cuisine edit. The cuisine of East Timor consists of regional popular foods such as pork, fish, basil, tamarind, legumes, corn, rice, root vegetables, and tropical fruit. East Timorese cuisine has influences from Southeast Asian foods and from Portuguese dishes from its colonization by Portugal. Flavors and ingredients from other former Portuguese colonies can be found due to the centuries-old Portuguese presence on the island. Sports edit. Main article, Sport in East Timor. Sports organizations joined by East Timor include the International Olympic Committee, IOC, the International Association of Athletics Federations, IAAF, the International Badminton Federation, IBF, the Union Cyclist International, the International Weightlifting Federation, the International Table Tennis Federation, IDTF, and East Timor's national football team joined FIFA. East Timorese athletes competed in the 2003 Southeast Asian Games held 2003. In the 2003 Asian Paralympics Games, East Timor won a bronze medal. In the Athens 2004 Olympic Games, East Timorese athletes participated in athletics, weightlifting and boxing. East Timor won 3 medals in arnis at the 2005 Southeast Asian Games. East Timor competed in the first Lissaphani Games and, in October 2008, the country earned its first international points in a FIFA football match with a 2-2 draw against Cambodia. 106. East Timor competed at the 2014 Winter Olympics. Thomas Americo was the first East Timorese fighter to fight for a world boxing title. He was murdered in 1999, shortly before Indonesian occupation of East Timor ended.